Joyful blessings. This is Kaylin Castell with a look at the sky mysteries on understanding any Venus retrograde. It's maybe not what you think, or maybe not what you've heard, or maybe not what you have been told is what's going on with Venus retrograde. So we're going to dive into that. We're going to look at the differing views of this Venus retrograde. We're going to look at the 3 phases of the Venus retrograde cycle. We're going to look at the evening star Venus retrograde phase. That's one of the 3 phases. The Venus with the sun in the metamorphic underworld, that's the 2nd phase of the Venus retrograde. And we'll look at the morning star rise that begins the new 19-month Venus cycle. That's the 3rd phase of the Venus cycle. And then the preparation for a new Venus initiatory journey. So these are the things we'll be covering. So from a Venus alchemy point of view, Venus, when she is retrograde, is in her greatest strength and power. She's closest to the earth and she's brightest. So not contrary to popular belief, she is not diminished, but rather she's empowered and enhanced during her retrograde phase. So something to also understand is that when Venus goes retrograde, this is really the completion or the synthesis of the current cycle that she's in. And this always happens while she's evening star. And the Venus retrograde ends after she becomes a morning star. We'll see more about that in a moment. And when she becomes a morning star, she's going through a total reincarnation from one expression of the divine feminine to another. So whatever sign Venus is in as the morning star rise, at the morning star rise, this is the primary archetype of the divine feminine for the entire 19-month Venus cycle. And these are currently found, and you can see the dates I've given here for the Capricorn cycle, then it goes to the Leo cycle, then it goes to the Pisces cycle, then to the Libra cycle, and to the Gemini cycle, and then back to the Capricorn cycle. So these are the 5 meta goddesses that are on the in the collective psyche of humanity during the 19-month Venus cycle. So these are the expressions of the feminine that are most prominent during a Venus cycle, based on which sign Venus was in when she rose as morning star. So for women, Venus is representing their intended feminine expression in this life, in the current life. And for men, Venus represents their inner feminine, inner beloved, or inner other, or the aspect of the feminine they're connecting to and relating to within themselves. And there's way more we could say about that, but we're focusing on Venus retrograde right now. So just so that you know, there's also many, many, many phases of the Venus cycle that helps to create a deeper understanding of the Venus, not just the sign she's in, not just the meta goddess, but what phase she's in. And that's something we cover in the Venus Signature series. So it's way deeper, way more profound than a lot of people realize. Now, other views of Venus retrograde, and just so you know, these are not the views or experiences that Venus alchemy has, or that I have, or that many people who now have connected with working in Venus in this way, it's not their experience either. But mainstream astrology does see Venus as ruling social and love relationships, marriage, beauty, money, financial security, what is valued. So this is a limited view of Venus because she's so much more than that. Any sign that Venus is in represents an expression of the divine feminine that is here to be played out, to be expressed through the person who has Venus in that sign. If she's morning star, evening star, underworld, metamorphic underworld, that adds a whole other dimension of our understanding of Venus. There's also some other more subtle factors that we could look at to get that sense of what the Venus signature is about. But here's what conventional wisdom says about Venus retrograde. And their view is that the energy of Venus is turning in on itself, and Venus is diminished as a result, suggesting, and I'm going to say before I give you what these points are, that this is only true if you believe it's true. If you don't believe this is true, and I've never had these experiences in Venus retrograde, or maybe I have had them way back when, but I have changed my point of view, so I'm not having them now, but they would say that Venus retrograde is not a time to start a love affair or get married. It's not a time to remodel, renovate, get a new wardrobe, cosmetic surgery, or a new hairdo. I kind of find that one funny. It's not a time for having parties or social events, and it's not a time for major financial undertakings. It is a time for creating a budget and a financial plan, and it may be difficult to engage the energy consciously during a Venus retrograde. Hidden undercurrents in relationships might surface. Maybe there is intense energy. Somebody might feel bitchy or grumpy. They may feel more fragile and vulnerable. They may have to face what is hidden, repressed, and minimized. Now, some of these things may be somewhat true, but when we consider that Venus is in her strength and her power, she's closest to the earth, she's brightest, she is the most magnificent to see during the retrograde, that it's not, these things are not necessarily true. It's just been an old perspective, an old perception. So let's just look at this a little more deeply. When Venus is retrograde, she's usually stationing retrograde after having been in the evening sky for about 7 or 8 months. She's usually around 28 or 29 degrees from the sun in the evening sky when she goes retrograde. And it also happens within 2 to 28 days after a 7th or 8th gate. And the gates are when Venus and Moon conjunct and come together. And they do that 7 or 8 times in the evening sky. Once Venus becomes visible again in the evening sky. And they from the Inanna story, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, they represent chakra gates. So this is something that's always signaling. We know when we're getting to the 7th or 8th gate that Venus is getting ready to go retrograde. When she's retrograde in the evening sky, it's for about 16 days. And then about 3 days before she makes an exact conjunction with the sun, she disappears from the evening sky. And then she's with the sun for an average of 7 to 8 days. Now, sometimes it can go quicker, but we just say average 7 to 8 days. That's a whole other subject we could go into another time. Then Venus rises as a morning star, still retrograde. She's in the morning sky while retrograde for about 16 days. Then she goes direct. And then from that direct point is when she makes 7 or 8 more conjunctions with the moon before she goes into a longer underworld time when she's on the other side of the sun. So Venus is retrograde for about 40 days. She's 16 days in the evening sky, she's 8 days with the sun, and she's 16 days in the morning sky. And this is, of course, an average. It's not always exactly this formula, but Venus retrogrades are considered to be about 40 days. So if you take 16 plus 16 plus 8, that equals 40. And again, not always precise. So the Venus cycle, the way that we have been working with it is guided by the Inanna story created by the Sumerians. And this is an image here of Inanna, ancient Sumerian stone carving of Inanna. And what we have done in Venus Alchemy is we have recreated the 19-month synodic cycle of Venus as a ceremonial initiatory rite of passage guided by the Sumerian myth of the descent and ascent, not just the descent, but the descent and ascent of Inanna. And the Inanna story is a brilliant, just most amazing cosmological description of how the Venus cycle works, how Venus is moving through the sky. And it gives us so many clues about how we can work with it ceremonially. In fact, the Sumerians ceremonially reenacted the Inanna story when Venus rose as morning star near the spring equinox. And this is what inspired Venus Alchemy to ceremonially work with the Venus cycle. So this was one of the ways that the Sumerians were engaging the Venus initiation both personally and collectively And we have found working with it, and we work with all 5 of the cycles. It has been illuminating and life-changing for us and for those who usually join us, who are inspired to join us. So if you're interested in the current Venus ceremonial cycle or the one that's about to start, depending on when you're watching this video, you can go to venusalchemy.com and there'll be information about the current cycle or the one that's about to start. Now, Venus in the evening sky, or Inanna in the Venus evening sky retrograde, after she goes retrograde, and again is visible for about 16 days in the evening sky. This is marking the completion of the current cycle of Inanna, and it's that initiation that's beginning the integration phase. So this whole 19 months, it's been, about 18 months or so, that Venus has been in going through the initiation of the ascent, the descent and the ascent. And then she is doing the integration of that, but she's also preparing for a new incarnation. And evening star Venus retrograde is a time of reflection, integration, and preparation to alchemically transform into a new expression of self. It's really amazing and powerful. So evening star Venus, one of the ways to work with this 16-day time period is to take time to integrate and reflect on what's happened over the past 19 months of the Venus cycle. Look at what's occurred in your life. Just think back to, it's not really, but it's probably more like 18 months or 17 and a half months if you want to be more precise. Anyway, but think about the things that have happened, and it's a great time to really feel and express gratitude for everything you have learned. It's also powerful to celebrate all the ways you have grown and evolved during the cycle. And it's about preparing to surrender your old identity as you prepare to be reborn anew. And then a question you might ask as part of this process of reflecting back on what's been going on: what aspect of myself or identity am I ready to let go of or change? And then Venus is in the metamorphic underworld for 8 days, 7 or 8 days, sometimes only a day. That is kind of startling to think about, but sometimes it moves much more quickly through the underworld, the metamorphic underworld. But this is when Venus is passing between the Earth and the Sun. And because Venus is passing between the Earth and the Sun, you see this dot on the Sun here. This is when Venus transited the face of the Sun in 2004 and 2012. That happened in our lifetime, and it won't happen again until 2125 before it happens again. So the thing that is now Venus with the Sun is going through what we call the metamorphic underworld. And this is where the alchemical goddess is undergoing a complete death of her old identity, and she's preparing to be reborn in a new incarnation of the goddess. It's a really powerful, and if we think about metamorphic, it's somewhat similar to the caterpillar going through a metamorphosis to become the butterfly, as you can see in this image here. So what's this transformational intent, and how do we work with it? Well, this is time to surrender your old identity, including limited perspectives and awareness, while preparing for rapid transformation into a new identity. Now, this may not be happening for you personally as much, but it may happen more specifically to those who are in their 8-year Venus return. But it can happen to anyone at any time. I've definitely had experiences of this myself in all the Venus cycles. So it's also a time to experience time and reality in a more fluid way. And expanded awareness is possible, including liberation from the constraints of linear time and 3D reality. It's in that metamorphic phase. It's in that place of rapid transformation. So regular linear reality and 3D reality are not necessarily going to be experienced the same. And this is especially true for those who are either completing a Venus return or beginning a Venus return. And Venus returns from this perspective are every 8 years. So It's possible to experience all possibilities in the realm of magic and joy that uplifts you and those around you, expanding and accelerating cosmic consciousness. And it's a great time to allow for a quantum leap in consciousness, accelerating personal and collective evolutionary development. So it's a powerful, quick, very short time that Venus is in this metamorphic time. She's making this profound alchemical quantum leap. And this happens in our personal and collective consciousness. If we're paying attention and choosing to engage this process, we will tend to be more aware of it happening at that time. And it's a great time to engage practices designed to support this transition. So first, by starting out by inquiring more deeply into our deepest soul desire for our life, and then engage these practices by opening to new states of awareness intended to create a whole new reality of what you most deeply desire. And some suggestions here, there's many more, but just a few: prayer, meditation, vision boards, medicine wheels, altars, sacred ceremonies, time in nature. These are all highly recommended practices. So find something that works for you that helps you tune into this time. And then another thing that's really helpful is to focus on your vision, which of course creating vision boards is really good for, because that helps to shift your vibration. So you're aligning with your desired timeline or desired reality. And this is the time to take decisive and inspired action as if this reality is already so. And there's practices about giving advanced gratitude for what it is that you're truly wanting to create in your life. This would be a good time to practice that. And then Venus retrograde rises as a morning star and out of the metamorphic underworld, and she emerges as the reincarnated meta-goddess guiding our way for the next 19 months. And again, she's retrograde for another 16 days at her heliacal rise. And this is something that across ancient cultures, across the globe, they viewed the heliacal rise of Venus as a time of great power. The Sumerians, the Babylonians, we know the Mayans, and there may be others. Those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. Some cultures even timed their wars to coincide with the heliacal rise of Venus into the morning sky. Other cultures practiced ritual sacrifice, often blood sacrifice, indicating this was understood as a powerful timing to engage. Sacrifice, the original meaning of the word sacrifice is to make sacred. And so if we think about that as the meaning for our in our current time, then we can work with making this time sacred through our intention and attention and the practices that we're engaging. So, of course, continuing with the practices of the metamorphic underworld are beneficial. Now, this is a document called Venus Regulated Warfare and Ritual Sacrifice in Mesoamerica by John B. Carlson. And I just gave you an image of it. You can read it, perhaps pause the video and look, but it's basically talking about everything I just mentioned. Now, Morning Star retrograde is a great time to prepare for a spiritual initiation, and especially while she's retrograde. Once she starts moving forward, then it's like she's engaging the initiation, but there's a time of preparation before that happens. So the preparation is for the descent into the underworld, for the process of dying to something to be reborn to something new. So it's the perfect time to gather our inner forces, build our strength, get clear on our personal commitments and what strategy best serves the fulfillment of those commitments, and to be all in for what comes next and trust it is happening for us and not to us. That this initiation cycle is powerfully activating something that is important for us, that will take us into greater alignment with what our true destiny is. So, inspired action. Are you being guided by the universe? And the answer, as far as I'm concerned, is yes, you are, if you're choosing to be. So here's a great question that you could work with as you're doing your morning star preparation for the spiritual journey while Venus is retrograde. What would it take for me to be fully prepared and ready to engage in inspired, decisive action to fulfill my soul purpose and mission? So those are all the phases of the Venus cycle. This is kind of a summary, this charge of the alchemical goddess, as a way to wrap up and complete what it is that we've been talking about. And if you feel inspired, you can come back to this invocation or prayer or whatever you want to call it as a way to get the summary of everything and the intention powerfully expressed. So here it goes. I am the goddess of alchemical transformation. I am all endings, all beginnings, and all that is in between. I am ancient and I am newborn. I am the alchemy of life itself. I offer all that I am as I surrender again and again, dying to be reborn. My galactic womb gives birth to the ever-evolving universe through renewal of this wondrous metamorphic process. I am your quantum leap into the unknown, into the beyond. I inspire you to abandon, let go, and release all that is not love. I urge you to surrender into your true, pure, radiant heart. I am the new earth, the new reality, the new you reborn. I am you, fully realized, awakened, and transformed. Together we enter a new dream, creating a new reality of peace, loving peace, plenty, and illumination. It is done, it is so, and so it is. Blessed be.